Kia ora everyone and welcome back to Humankind. I'm JumboPixel and today I'm going to talk about 3 things that I'd like to see changed in Humankind. This is not an exhaustive list, but I think this is a good opportunity for us to reflect on the game. It's been out for 100 days, I've played a lot of playthroughs, and I've got 3 things in particular that I feel quite passionately about. If you have something that you feel passionately about, do comment it below. I say that not to feed the beast that is the YouTube algorithm, but because I know that from time to time, some people from Amplitude do stop by the channel, and a video like this may be more likely to draw their attention, so please do comment below. And without any further ado, let's jump straight in. And the reason why you're looking at ocean gameplay is because my first one of 3 is some ways that I think we could expand on the ocean system as a whole. At the moment, you're seeing me navigate some ships around to sink some enemies, and my goodness, it's fun. I do love the ocean gameplay, so maybe I'm a little bit biased here, but hear me out. Before you do, I just want to quickly say I have 5 copies of Humankind to give away, and I'll be giving them away on my Twitter, so pop over there for a follow, and next month for the holiday season, you may just find yourself with a copy of Humankind. Back to the boats. Now, first thing I would like, it's a small thing, and I think it would make a big difference if we could have some or all harbour units act as anchors, pun fully intended, for other districts. What do I mean by that? I mean, when I place down a harbour, it would be nice if I could build something. It doesn't even have to be all types of district, just something next to it. For example, a recent game I was playing is the Dutch. Their unit synergizes by being built near the docks. It's kind of like a dockyard, almost. But I can't build it near a harbour because the harbour does not act as an anchor point like a city centre or a hamlet. It would be nice if at least, maybe even just a couple of specialist harbours maintained this ability, just to help us build our empires a little bit more around the sea. Likewise, I think we could maybe use some more sea resources, discoveries even. I think there are lots of different opportunities here. One that comes to mind that was mentioned by Huck, my moderator, during a stream was, well, maybe we should have wreckages left over after sea fights, like the one you're seeing me try to start here, if it weren't for the fact that my opponent was constantly running away from my terrifyingly powerful boats. Imagine if, kind of like in Civilization 6 with the antiquity sites, if we had those discoveries in Humankind in the ocean, relics of the past, if you will. And of course, there are lots of other options available with sea resources, right? I'm sure you can think of many sea resources that could be added into Humankind. And I think the last thing that I would like to see personally is another type of ship, or maybe multiple types. At the moment, we're somewhat limited with our naval units. Early boats are, by and large, for the most part, generally designed to be land transport ships only. Land unit transport ships, I should say. You're not picking up a continent, chucking it on your fishing boat, and paddling it over to Memphis. What I mean to say is that a lot of the boats in Humankind's early game are basically just designed to accompany units, and then in the later game, you find that a lot of the boats are, of course, military. How about a third category that could potentially be introduced at nearly any point in the game? Think of it as an economic vessel or a resource gathering vessel, right? What about a massive shipping boat? Not like the basic ones in Civilization 6 that you click on, send out to a fish, click it, and it disappears forever. But what about a big vessel? Think like aircraft carrier, but instead for fishing. A big fishing vessel that I can send out. Maybe there are different areas in the ocean that have more or less food, and that could be another random element added to the map, right? Wonderful catchment zones. Maybe later in the game we have the ability to enact national parks or zones where people can't do any fishing or resource extraction at all. I'll talk a little bit more about geopolitics in the third part of this video, but I think that we could see some expansion of Humankind's naval units in various ways. By the way, the gameplay that you're watching is broadly related to what I'm talking about, but because I'm talking about ideas up in the sky, sometimes you're going to watch just the rest of it play out, like that wonderful battle. Let's move through into my second point now and take a look at this bad boy. I had a lot of fun playing a modded culture that was designed around religion, and it's got me thinking, I think we can expand the system a little bit. But, as I've always said, and I still maintain this from day one, when a lot of people were dogging on Humankind's religious system, it is not, I don't believe, a bad system, but it is a relatively basic system. And I don't mean that in a good or bad way, because as someone who doesn't really like to be sending 20 or 30 missionaries around the map and constantly clicking them and dodging them and moving them, like you may have to do in Civilization 6, for example, I do prefer my religion to, for the most part, be more of something that I'm managing from the top down, rather than managing it on the ground with loads and loads of individual units. However, that could absolutely be a way for humankind to adapt, add, or revolutionize its religious system. One question and query that I have about the tenets themselves is, how do they scale and why? In Tenet Tier 1 there are 8, and then in the rest there are about 6. But they don't scale with game speed, or the number of players, or the size of the map. So in a large game, you could completely run out of all tenets and not have any opportunity to found a religion. But then in a small game, you can never run out, because there are 8 to 6 opportunities. If you're only playing against 4 opponents, easy. A couple of things that I think could maybe change it in some ways. I think it would be nice to see sort of a fracturing in the religious system. A chance maybe for people to catch up, for example. Heresy, schisms within a faith could be something to do. I'd also think we could probably expand it out across new cultures and districts and ideas, right? Many modded cultures do a great job at that, including the Israel mod that I was playing just about a minute ago in this video. And lastly, I think maybe it could be a role between managing the state and the religion, i.e. your religion is likely to gain more followers or grow faster if you choose to give some of the state's resources to the church. Perhaps there's a slider in-game and you can choose how much gold you'd like to give to the church. Giving it not much adds to the risk that your religion will somehow impact your empire negatively, and giving a lot to the church has, of course, positive impacts on the growth of your faith, and maybe even stability as well. Maybe there are some things to unpack there. Let me know your thoughts. Last but not least, I want to talk about the geopolitical system. And this is going to include everything from the conclusion of this battle with an independent tribe of Luluban, right the way through to war support and indeed other diplomatic relations, because it doesn't all have to be blood, guts, and gory. We're allowed to change it up a little bit and maybe have some more peaceful relations. If you take a look at the overall way that humankind handles diplomacy and geopolitics, it's relatively linear throughout the entire game. From almost turn 1 right the way until almost turn 300, your diplomatic abilities don't change. You have the fundamental send some trade routes, go to war or don't go to war, open borders, no open borders, those kinds of decisions. There are multiple layers, of course. You can ally up with somebody and sort of upgrade those benefits, but that's it. And it stays that way throughout. And to me, that just doesn't feel right. And I think there's a missed opportunity at the very least toward the contemporary era of the game. Regular viewers of the channel will know I'm a big fan of being the Senate. And I think that a World Congress or similar should, or at least could, be implemented into Humankind. Some sort of addition to the late game that adds depth to the diplomacy. Because at the moment, it's a bit shallow, right? Let's be real. It is a bit shallow. Moving on to war support. The imperfect system that is. And I have to say, I actually don't quite agree with perhaps what is a somewhat common consensus that it's entirely broken. I like the fact that war support is tied to how well or poorly different nations do, and eventually a society gets to 0 and just has to surrender. I like that a lot, because I think that's actually quite realistic. It makes sense that there would be a point where a population just wouldn't tolerate it anymore, or a government just couldn't sustain it anymore. Indeed, we've seen that in real life, right? It's not that ridiculous. In fact, I actually quite like that a lot. The system, though, could still be tweaked around the edges, particularly where there are multiple aggressors or multiple defenders. It gets messy then, I think. At its very base level, totally fine. But once you start adding in extra dynamics, it becomes quite confused. And I think there's a little bit of work to do. There's some project and commissioning to do there around ironing that out and just making that a little bit more smooth. I think also my third and maybe final point on the geopolitical note is, yes, I would love a World Congress. And yes, I would love these systems that you're seeing here, trade, negotiations, blah, 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 to be upgraded. I think the crisis system is quite nice, though. I like that a lot. However, I would like to see more broader international negotiations outside of the World Congress. For example, you could have taxation or tariffs imposed on trade. Trade is another thing, actually, as a wee tangential side note that maybe could use some improvement. When you trade, for those who don't know, you pay a certain amount of gold, let's say 60, and you get access to the opponent's resource, saffron. You pay 60 once, and then that's it. There is no ongoing benefit. So it can feel like, if you're a player who has a lot of luxuries, and other players simply have none, it can kind of feel like, well, why would I want to give them access to all of my luxuries for the sake of a few turns worth of gold per turn? Maybe they're paying 60 to 120 per luxury, and I have 10, I get 1,000 gold. In this game, I'm making 1,304 gold per turn, right? It's relatively insignificant. I think we need to see some sort of ongoing money earned per trade route. There are some mechanics in the game already, and so credit where credit is due. There are ways to earn money from ongoing trade with infrastructures. Those exist. Civics as well, but I think there's probably a way to streamline it with a broader geopolitical system that makes it much more obvious and intuitive. I also think that more streamlined, more broad system could probably benefit from other diplomatic sanctions as well, right? Think Civilization 6, where we embargo players and then expand all of that out to the neutral tribes as well. I think they could play a greater role in diplomacy and maybe even a more substantial role as city-states rather than roaming sort of quasi-nomadic come-and-go kind of tribes moving forward into the later game, right? Not to say we should steal Civ 6's system, but there may be ways to sophisticate those nomadic tribes and bring them in so that they play a more impactful part in the later game. Thank you very much for watching. Do post your comments below, and I'll see you next time. Also, I'm on Twitch now. Come say hello.